He is the person of the lowest moral character that I've ever worked for. The man that you saw on January 6th is the man that he is every day. Don't let him fool you.
He had spent, at that point, nearly 5 years, 6 years, convincing good, hardworking American people that they were under siege, that they were under threat. But that day showed, in my view, that he is the threat, that Donald Trump is the threat, that Donald Trump put us under siege.
Republican elected officials, I should say, tend to whitewash the events of that day. In the immediate aftermath, so many people were united and disgusted by his behavior and wanted to turn the page on Donald Trump. And so if you would have told me that all these years later that he would be the Republican candidate for president, I wouldn't believe you.
We have to have two parties that believe in the Constitution. That's not where we are right now.
If there's one image that I hope that my future children, God willing, get to see from this election cycle, it's that political cowardice does not win, and that women with spines of steel, like Ms. Cheney here, are saving our country.
Nothing less than saving our country from the cowardice of men. That display of courage and brutal honesty in a time in our country with so much cowardice and obfuscation really is a stunning thing to behold. That was former Republican Congresswoman Liz Cheney, alongside former Trump aides Sarah Matthews, Alyssa Farah Griffin, and Cassidy Hutchinson. It was a Harris campaign event last night. They were making the case for Vice President Harris in Montgomery County, Pennsylvania, crucial battleground. They were warning us specifically and bluntly about the danger of their party, the Republican Party's nominee, and making the case for all Americans to follow their example and their courage and put partisanship aside in November to vote for Kamala Harris, not just because she's the better choice, but because they would be saving America and saving democracy from the guy they used to work for, Donald Trump. Joining us now, one of those former Trump aides you heard speak last night, former White House Deputy Press Secretary Sarah Matthews is back on the program. The Rev's here as well. Sarah, let me play a little bit more of what you guys had to say about this process of coming out, speaking out against not just your party, but your boss. Here's Cassidy Hutchinson talking about testifying and being received with compassion. We'll look for that, and we'll play that in a second. But I want to ask you what your experience has been like. We've had a chance to talk to you before, but never. Oh, we have it now. Let me play this for you real quick.
I expected the vitriol from the Trump world. I expected them to come after me. I had once been part of that machine. But what I wasn't sure was going to happen was where I was going to land. Who was going to catch me? It was leaders like Nancy Pelosi, President Biden, Vice President Harris, who showed me out of this period of darkness when I made the decision to step into the light. I knew that I was essentially leaving everything I knew behind, but I had no idea how bright life in the light could be. I'm reminded of how much more there is that unites us than divides us, but Donald Trump thrives on that division and that fear, and we have to overcome that. And there are so many people in this country who want to overcome that.
This is an incredibly powerful and compelling message that if you guys could do this, could step out from under the person you work for and not just say no more, but then campaign for and champion Vice President Kamala Harris, then anything's possible. What did that feel like?
Yeah, as Cassidy mentioned last night, it is a really scary thing to speak out against Donald Trump. He's vicious to his opponents, particularly women, when they speak out against him. And that's why I'm so happy that I have these women by my side. I don't know if I'd have the strength if it wasn't for Liz Cheney setting an example for us. I mean, look, this is a woman who was in Republican leadership, who potentially could have been Speaker of the House right now if she had just stayed the course and kept her mouth shut. But you know what she did? She spoke truth to power. And she is an example for all of us of what it means to put partisanship aside and be a patriot and love your country. And Alyssa Farah Griffin and Cassidy Hutchinson are examples of that as well. And so we've been in this fight together. We understand that there are things that are more important than party, and we want to be able to spread our message. So that's why we took our message to Pennsylvania, battleground state, and wanted to get the word out there that Donald Trump is wholly unfit to ever be president again. And we encourage those that are undecided to cast their vote for Kamala Harris, because even if you disagree with her on policy, which the four of us do, there would definitely be policies we disagree with her on. We all still identify as Republicans. There are things that also matter when casting your ballot, like the Constitution, like character. And so I believe Kamala Harris will make a great president. And so that's why we got our message out there in Pennsylvania yesterday.
You all, especially as communicators, understand the toxic brew that Donald Trump whips up himself and spoon feeds to the base. What's your best advice on how to break through to those people who've been drinking those lies now for 8.5 years?
I think the biggest thing is that you're never going to shame people out of their beliefs. And I think that way back when Hillary Clinton made the comment about basket of deplorables. And I don't know if that's necessarily the right approach. And I think that in her 60 Minutes interview this past Sunday, the vice president was asked about this. And I thought that she had a really good response about how there is more that unites us than divides us. And I think that that message rings true. And so we need to reach out to these people with compassion and understanding. If we want to defeat MAGA, even if Donald Trump loses in November, MAGA isn't going to go away. And so we need to be compassionate. Sure, there are going to be people who are going to be with him no matter what, and you might not ever be able to convince them otherwise. But I do believe that there are those people who are on the fence. They might have voted for him in 2016 and 2020. But they're put off by his character. And we just need to remind them that character matters. And we want our children to look up to their president and it be someone who they're inspired by. And I don't think that anyone out there would want their future children or their current children to grow up and behave like Donald Trump. I certainly wouldn't. I don't have children yet, but hopefully I will one day. And I want them to look up to their leaders and be inspired by them. And Donald Trump displays behavior quite the opposite.
Your fellow colleagues in the West Wing, the men, where are they?
Yeah, it's quite disappointing that it's the women who tend to have the loudest voices when it comes to my former colleagues, and that many of these men are staying on the sidelines. And for me, that just wasn't a risk I was willing to take. I know the threat that Donald Trump poses, and I wouldn't be able to look myself in the mirror if I didn't do everything in my power to make sure he never steps foot in the Oval Office again. And so I understand that some of these men might have different calculations. I know that his own vice president, Mike Pence, has refused to endorse him, but won't go as far as saying he's voting for Kamala Harris. And then you have others like John Kelly and Mark Esper who have said what a threat Donald Trump is, but again, aren't taking that next step. And so, I mean, there's still 26 days, but I'm not necessarily holding my breath. But at least for me, I wanted to do everything in my power to make sure that Donald Trump is never president again.